Every 4 years, a massive psychological weather event moves across the surface of the globe. Workplaces go completely quiet, and grown adults weep openly in the streets without an ounce of shame. An entire nation can lose its collective sanity because a ball hit a post and bounced the wrong way. And right there in the middle of all this mass hysteria, you are completely unbothered. Maybe you just feel slightly annoyed that your entire feed is suddenly covered in jerseys and flags. People look at you with genuine concern, as if your apathy is a medical condition that needs treating. But here's the thing. The data actually suggests you might be the most self-aware person in the room. Let's look at what's really happening. To understand why billions care so deeply about a game, we have to look at how the human ego manages its own self-esteem. In 1976, social psychologist Robert Cialdini documented a specific behavior that explains this entire collective fever. He monitored university students and noticed they routinely wore school apparel the morning after their football team won. If the team lost, the branded clothing stayed in the closet. The students hadn't played a single minute of the game, yet proximity to the win felt like ownership of the win. Cialdini called this phenomenon burging, or basking in reflected glory. It is an opportunistic psychological strategy where we use group membership to artificially inflate our personal value. You can hear this mechanism working in the exact language fans use on a regular basis. When the team wins, the pronoun is inclusive. We played brilliantly today. The moment the team loses, the language shifts to protect the self. They completely fell apart. The ego quietly sidesteps the wreckage of a loss while rushing to absorb the credit for a victory. This is a core component of social identity theory, which says humans seek out groups to feel distinct and worthy. Sports fandom provides a pre-packaged, highly accessible vehicle for this exact type of psychological scaffolding. If you were sitting there feeling nothing, it simply means your ego isn't using that specific vehicle to build its worth. Without that prior attachment, the entire emotional transaction fails to process. Maybe this sounds familiar to you. You're sitting on a sofa surrounded by friends or family who are leaning forward, holding their breath. The tension in the room is thick enough to cut, but to you, it feels entirely like white noise. Someone scores, the room explodes, and you find yourself doing that awkward, tight-lipped half-smile. You are performing enthusiasm just to survive the social interaction without having to explain yourself. It is exhausting because you're forcing a reaction to something that looks completely mundane. To your brain, it is just a group of strangers running around on grass across the world. You aren't cold. You're just completely detached from the script everyone else is reading. Let's actually look under the hood at what happens in the brain of an invested fan during a match. The entire experience relies heavily on a specific quirk in our dopamine pathways. Many people think dopamine is released when we get a reward, but neuroscientists know it fires during the anticipation of a reward. When the outcome of a situation is completely unpredictable, dopamine levels skyrocket and stay elevated. This mechanism is known as intermittent reinforcement. It is the exact same psychological architecture that makes slot machines so incredibly addictive. You pull the lever or you watch the clock tick down, and the resolution keeps not arriving. The brain hooks onto the near miss, the shot that grazes the crossbar, the referee's controversial call. Each near miss resets the anticipation loop, demanding that you stay tuned to see how it ends. For an invested fan, this creates a sustained state of intense behavioral compulsion. But for someone who doesn't care about the World Cup, this entire loop lacks a foundation. In order for that uncertainty to trigger a dopamine spike, your brain requires a prior identification with the outcome. If you don't care who wins, the unpredictability doesn't feel like a thrilling ride. It feels completely flat. It feels like watching a stranger flip a coin in a dark room for an hour and a half. Your nervous system isn't broken. It simply hasn't paid the emotional entry fee required to run the simulation. There is a unique type of social pressure that happens when a tournament shifts from local clubs to entire nations. Suddenly, it isn't just a sport anymore. It is packaged as an emotional mandate for your flag. You are expected to feel personally victorious because 11 people who happen to share your passport did something athletic. But if you're a naturally analytical person, that emotional arithmetic just doesn't land. You didn't choose your birthplace, and a jersey doesn't automatically hold the weight of your actual worldview. You aren't missing a sense of roots. You just prefer an identity that fits, rather than one that is simply handed to you because of a geographic accident. To put this in perspective, we need to realize that global sports fandom is a very recent cultural experiment. For the vast majority of human history, belonging was built locally, in small groups through direct, physical interactions. Then, the 20th century introduced mass media, and human psychology had to adapt to something completely new. In 1956, sociologists Donald Horton and Richard Knowle coined a term for this shift: parasocial relationships. This describes a one-sided psychological bond where a person invests deep emotional energy into a figure who has absolutely no idea they exist. When you watch a world-class athlete on a screen, your ancient tribal brain can't easily tell the difference between a broadcast and a real-life community connection. It translates the spectacle into a feeling of collective survival and shared destiny. But if you are someone who naturally opts out of this hype, your brain is actually operating closer to our baseline evolutionary design. You aren't broken or socially deficient. You just possess a higher threshold for where you invest your sense of belonging. You require real proximity, personal alignment, or concrete shared history before you hand over your emotional stability to a group. A mass-produced identity delivered through a television signal to millions of people simultaneously simply feels too hollow to anchor your attention. When you step back and look at the big picture, opting out of the collective frenzy isn't a flaw. It means your attention system is calibrated differently. You aren't wasting cognitive energy on a spectacle designed to manufacture temporary highs and lows for the masses. While the rest of the world is riding an artificial roller coaster of stress, anger, and borrowed pride, you get to keep your peace. Your identity isn't hanging on the line every 90 minutes based on what happens on a field halfway across the world. You have built your emotional scaffolding somewhere more authentic, somewhere grounded in your real everyday life. And that level of psychological self-awareness is rare. One last reminder, and I only bring up things I'd actually put in front of you. There's a link in the description to a bundle I think a lot of you will find genuinely useful, especially if you're the kind of person who naturally filters out the noise of mass culture. If your brain prefers internal focus over external hype, it often means you process things deeply, which can make it hard to shut off at night or maintain consistent focus during the day. The bundle covers exactly that: a dedicated 7-day sleep guide, a dopamine reset to clear out the mental clutter, a focus rebuild, and a mental clarity planner. Each one is built around daily actions, not just endless information, because information without structure is just more noise. It's pinned in the comments below too, worth a look. And if you want more videos that unpack the hidden psychology behind our everyday behavior, go ahead and hit subscribe.